Looking at the reading 9 review questions, the last Machiavelli reading. Number 1, Machiavelli clearly thinks that if you must choose between them, it is better to be feared than loved. But why? What support does he offer for this? I think it's probably the central point of The Prince for me. And it's interesting to see what he says in defense of his claim here. And I would say that if you look at the text, he points to human nature. He talks about how people actually are. And it's a very pessimistic view of human nature. That people are basically selfish. And when it comes down to it, you can not rely on their love because they'll love you. And this is the jaded view I think Machiavelli has of human nature based upon his experience of life. That people will support you and offer you everything as long as it's good for them. But the moment that it becomes difficult for them, then you find that their love meant nothing. To withdraw their love. But fear is more reliable because people choose to love you, he says, whether or not they love you, but they don't choose whether or not to fear you. They fear you because of some external threat that something that you can do to them. So if they have a dread of you, that dread will never leave them, no matter what happens. So it's just that fear is more reliable than love. He says, of course, we should want both, and we should want to be loved. But when it comes down to it, if you're going to be practical, choose fear, because fear is more reliable in terms of getting people to do what you want them to do rather than love. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that he's necessarily right, but it's, of course, very, very big issue. Number 2, an open-ended question. Do you think it is actually possible to inspire fear without being hated? I don't know. I think that when he touches on this issue, he mentions historical examples. And the most striking one to me was Hannibal, the great Carthaginian general who fought the Romans in the Second Punic War. And he points to him as somebody who was definitely feared, and feared by his men, feared by his soldiers. That was what was important, not feared by the Romans. Feared by his soldiers because he needed to maintain discipline in an army that was composed, as Machiavelli says, of many different nationalities, people from all over the Mediterranean world and Gaul, enemies of Rome, and how difficult it must have been to keep that disparate group together, and was only possible because his soldiers were terrified of him. Yet they didn't hate him. And I suppose, there is this concept which we haven't really focused on called virtù, which is the Italian for virtue, but means so much more, I think, than what we commonly acknowledge to be virtue. Virtue in the sense of virtuosity, a kind of a touch of greatness, which is almost Aristotelian in the way that it's about really judgment. It's about the capacity to make the right judgment and to make the right decision at the right time in the right way, the sort of indefinable knack for doing that. So people who had that knack, like Hannibal, like other great figures of history that Machiavelli points to, was able to do it. But I don't think it's very easy to do. That is, to inspire fear, but not to be hated. Number 3, Machiavelli says that, quote, it is necessary for a prince to understand how to avail himself of the beast and the man. What is he getting at by this remark? I think it's clearly what he's getting at is that you cannot always be moral. And that, especially in a fight, you have to learn how to fight like an animal without restrictions. And politics for Machiavelli was certainly a fight. Maybe this view does not really translate into every area of life. I think it'd probably be disastrous. Domestic life, friendships, but in politics at least, and perhaps in other regions of life, you have to be able to ignore justice. You have to be able to ignore ethics. Sometimes, at least. Like, you can't become a total beast, but you need to know when to act like a beast, I suppose. And by acting like a beast, I mean just doing something that ignores custom, tradition, ethics, even common decency. I don't know. I think that's what he's getting at by that remark. And this for practical reasons. And then we have an open-ended question in your own life. Is it more important to actually have a good characteristic like honesty, say, or appear to the world to have it? Obviously that's a personal question, but the reason I asked it is because in these last two chapters of our readings from The Prince, it's clear that Machiavelli is saying that, at least for a prince, it's much more important to have the appearance of having a good characteristic than actually have it. And this is a very old discussion, as I said in the video, in classical literature, going back, in my mind at least, to Plato and probably earlier, whether one should want to be just or whether it's more important to just have the reputation for justice is the big question in Plato's Republic. Clearly, Machiavelli is saying that it's more important to have the appearance of the characteristic than actually have it, and to actually have the characteristic can sometimes be your downfall. So I don't know. I think it's a question that we all are faced with in reading The Prince.